It is the Halloween season, and with it comes Halloween-based builds. Today, I'm doing the Vampire Hunter. Halloween is a great holiday for one shot, but it can be a pain to make your own, so we made one for you. Completely for free, you can find it in the link down in the description. But with that out of the way, let's get into the build. So let's start off with the concept. I wanted to take the vampire stat block and create the character that would hard counter every option it has. I definitely want to lean into the Van Helsing kind of typical vampire hunting tropes. I'm going to be using a crossbow. I want to have stakes lined up on my chest, and I want to be wearing a trench coat of some sort. And definitely, the more edgy we can slather on it, the better. So let's start off with Lineage. I wanted to go Shadar Kai for a couple different reasons. Reason number one is it's the most edgy of the elves. Reason number two is it comes with necrotic resistance, and vampire's most dangerous attack, which is their bite, its most dangerous damage type is necrotic, and that's what lowers your max health, is whatever necrotic damage it deals. So we're basically at half the same threat level that most people are against vampires already. In order for vampires to be incredibly threatening, they need to maintain a grapple. By having a pseudo misty step, we can escape that grapple basically at will for very little cost and continue the fight from there. But the most important by far is our ability to have advantage against charm saving throws. That is the most dangerous thing about vampires, is their ability to charm at a pretty significant DC, and this is going to be the beginning of us combating it. So we have our lineage, but what class are we going into? This is technically a homebrew class, but it's the most well-known homebrew out there, the most widely accepted. It's on your D&D Beyond app. This is the Blood Hunter by Matthew Mercer, specifically the Ghostslayer, and we're going to be taking all 20 levels into it. Now typically I don't go into homebrew, but this homebrew is so close to being raw that, you know what, I'm going to do a couple builds on it, beginning with this one. As for our stats, we're going to be going Dex primary, Constitution secondary, and we're going to be going Wisdom tertiary, but there's an asterisk on that. Normally, the Blood Hunter calls for Intelligence for its modifier dice. It's meant to be its tertiary. However, a variant feature was released for it where you got to choose between Intelligence or Wisdom. I'm going to assume that is going to be allowed. It's going to be allowed for this build. It's like using any other variant feature, like the Rangers, for example. But that's going to allow us to spec into Wisdom, which is going to be fantastic for this build for many different reasons, but most notably is it's going to increase our saves against Vampire's Charm. Starting off at level 1, we begin with a pretty soft counter that might become very, very important further down the line, and that is Hunter's Bane. It's going to give us advantage on survival checks or perception checks to track down vampires, as well as some other creatures, but of course the most important for us is vampires. If we combine this with a proficiency in survival and perception would have to be from your background, but if we combine those, we're going to be excellent at tracking them down. And vampires love to hide. They love to sneak away, and we're going to have this to begin countering it, but we're going to come up with some other counters to their sneaking later. Now we also get a Blood Curse. None of these hard counter vampires by any means, but I'm going to go with Blood Curse of the Eyeless. The idea behind this Blood Curse is that our bonus action and our action are extremely valuable to us. So by having our Blood Curse on our reaction, it's just going to be easier to spend it without such a high cost. And Blood Curse of the Eyeless is one of the best ones. It's going to keep us from being hit as often, or we can even protect our teammates. Level 2 is a big level for us. It's really where we come online. We get archery, fighting style here. Again, we're going to be using crossbow, so it's really important we get set up there. But we also get the Crimson Rite. We're going to be taking the Crimson Rite of Flame. Now, even though this is a vampire-focused build and vampires don't care about flame, this is also a hard counter to undead in general. Specifically, mummies are coming to mind when I think about, okay, well, who's an undead that we can do some extra damage to? Vampires come to mind, fire damage. We're going to have that, but next level, we're basically never going to use it unless we do run into a mummy or another creature who's really weak to fire. All right, level 3 is really where we start kicking it up a notch. We get the Rite of Dawn. The Rite of Dawn is going to change our fire Crimson Rite to radiant damage. Now, this is amazing on its own, especially against vampires, because vampires regenerate 20 health points every single turn unless they've taken radiant damage that turn. So basically, just by us existing, we are turning off their healing. So that is a massive counter to them. Basically, any damage we do, we add 20 to it because they're not regenerating that 20 points. But that's not all the Rite of Dawn does. If we're attacking an undead, a vampire, then we get to add an additional Rite damage die. Right now it's a D4, so it'll become 2D4, but that's only going to get better over time. Very powerful here though. Level 4 comes Crossbow Expert. Blood Hunters are all about the amount of attacks they can get, so Crossbow Expert is a no-brainer for this build. It's going to give us an additional attack, meaning that we can now proc our Crimson Rite again, and remember, our Crimson Rite's doing double damage against these vampires. That's a lot of extra damage. Level 5 is another huge level for us. We've had huge level after huge level after huge level here. Extra attack, same thing I talked about with Crossbow Expert. The more attacks, the better. But also, our Crimson Rite die increases to a D6. So now we are going to be doing 3d6 per hit to a vampire. Now, that's not taking into account that they're going to resist just our crossbow damage, but it's going to be doing 2d6 of radiant damage and then 1d6 of piercing that'll be resisted. And once we calculate the average DPR of us against a vampire at this level, and this is assuming we have a magic item, but it's not a +1 item, which is probably not going to happen at level 5, so take this with a grain of salt. But if we did, we'd be doing 23.85 damage per round, and that is not including the healing that we turn off. That means if we're fighting a vampire completely solo, they have a life expectancy of 6 to 7 turns. This is assuming that our teammates are doing nothing. Now, could we beat a vampire alone at this level? No, probably not. 6 to 7 turns is probably enough for them to cause problems for us before we really cause problems for them, but I'm trying to show that we're already a problem for them even at level 5. Level 6, we get a brand new Blood Curse, and we get another use of Blood Curse per day. Now, I'm probably still using these for Blood Curse of the Eyeless, but here are some different options for you. Now, the one I'm probably going to take is Blood Curse of Binding. Stopping somebody from having any movement speed can be very powerful, and we get that here. But if we're getting ourselves into a lot of social situations, Blood Curse of the Anxious stands out and lets us be more of a face. And it's really good on those days that we aren't in combat. We still can do something with our Blood Curses. And finally, if the vampire we're hunting is a spellcaster, I'm getting Blood Curse of the Muddled Mind, which is going to give them disadvantage on a concentration check. That can be very powerful against a spellcaster. But more importantly, we're getting the Brand of Castigation at this level. What this allows us to do is when we hit an enemy with Crimson Right damage, every single one of our attacks, we can choose to mark them. What marking them is going to do is going to allow us to know exactly where they are so long as they don't leave our plane of existence. That is incredibly important if we're fighting against a vampire, because when you kill a vampire, it's going to turn into its mist form, probably move through some cracks, and now we have a mark on it so we always know which direction it's at so we can hunt it down and kill it while it's in its coffin. It's a fantastic counter to vampires. Additionally, it gives us some thorns damage, both for us and anyone who is attacked by the marked creature within 5 feet of us, so we can do a little bit of reprisal damage. Now, our wisdom's probably 14, so it's only going to be 2 per attack, but they get 2 attacks per turn. That's going to be 4 damage a turn. It's decent, nothing crazy. Level 7, we get a new Crimson Right, but honestly, we don't care because Radiant is the Crimson Right damage for us. I would pick up Lightning just to have a more well-rounded portfolio, but still, Radiant's our go-to. Additionally, we get the ability a couple times today to walk through objects for a few rounds. This allows us to move in and out of walls. We can use that as cover for our shot, or we can use it to explore ahead of the party. There's a ton you can do with basically Ghost Walk. Level 8 is an ASI, and we could definitely take Dexterity here if we're feeling like maxing out our offense, but I'm going to recommend Resilient Wisdom. Resilient Wisdom is going to round us out by giving us proficiency in Wisdom saves, which is going to make us have a much stronger counter to those charm checks. We really want to be powerful against those charm checks, and we've set it up that we are. We've invested in Wisdom, we're proficient in Wisdom, and we have the advantage from being a Shadar Kai. Level 9 is our least awesome level by far. We get Grim Psychometry, which is just a mess of a feature. It really doesn't do much. It calls for knowing the history of a dark location, and it's just such a niche setup that you might use it once or twice in your whole campaign, if you're lucky. Level 10, we get Dark Augmentation. We're going to get some better physical saves, and we're going to have more speed. No one's going to say no to that, so we're happy to pick it up here. But our next really big level is level 11. Our Crimson Right die goes from a D6 to a D8. So keep in mind that we can hit a vampire with 6 of these a turn. Oh, did I say 6? I meant 9. Because now whenever we mark a creature, they take an additional Crimson Right damage when we hit them. This means that if they're undead, we can do 3 Crimson Right damage per attack. So every single one of our 3 attacks is going to do 1d6 plus 3d8 plus probably 3 damage at this level. This is assuming we went Resilient Wisdom. Assuming we have a +1 crossbow, hand crossbow, which I think is a fair assumption considering we're level 11, then we're going to be doing an average of 43.5 damage per round while stopping their regeneration, and because we hit level 11, our Brand of Castigation now doesn't allow them to move through objects or people. Now, I wouldn't count this as their Misty form because they're moving through cracks, not actual objects, but there is a specific vampire that does like to move through walls that this will hard counter. Something to keep in mind. Now, how good is that 43.5 DPR that also stops 20 points of regeneration? Well, it gives that vampire a life expectancy of about 4 turns against you alone. At this level, you can probably take a vampire mono pretty dang safely. Everything it does, you can counter pretty hard. It can't flee you. You have a tracker on it. All you have to do is chase it down and whittle it down, and it's going to die from you in 4 turns. That is a CR 13 creature that us as one level 11 character is taking down. Yeah, I'd say we are a vampire hunter. Of course, once we track it down, what we're going to do is we're going to pull out one of our stakes, stab it in its heart, drag it out into the sunlight, and watch it burn. Among doing some other fun things if you want to, but that sounds pretty fun to me. Now let's talk about this build a little bit outside of the scope of vampires. This counters undead extremely hard. I would say if this is in a undead heavy campaign, say Curse of Strahd, it is going to be incredibly powerful. That extra 3d8 of radiant damage we can do can be done to all undead. Even before then, just doing that 2d6 on every single attack, that's a great sword attack. We're hitting undead with that the whole campaign, extremely powerful. I would even call it overpowered in undead campaigns, but it's going to hold its own. It's going to be decent in campaigns where undead just show up every now and again, and can be fun to play no matter where, especially if you mix a vampire into your backstory, so that there's probably going to be one in your campaign. For my DMs, if you are running Curse of Strahd, definitely watch out for this build and tune around it if you have this character in there, because it is going to be nasty, a nasty damage dealer. Now that's my vampire hunter, but what would yours be? Let me know in the comments down below. While you're down there, don't forget to pick up the free one shot. Why not? It's free. And with that, my friends, I hope you have yourselves an incredible day, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.